Hello everyone, today I'm going to discuss the tier list and kind of what the thought process went into it for V1.7. I've made a few updates to the guide based on the kind of direction that season is going in, if you know what I mean. I have added a bunch of stuff over here as well, you should see if you haven't. So I have been getting a bunch of questions, so they're pretty basic questions really about the game. So I highly recommend beginners to actually read through the whole guide, especially like the mechanics explained section. Like a lot of the stuff that you guys are asking are already covered. You just have to watch the videos and read the stuff in here, and it'll be good. So let's start with the tier list. Right. So just a reminder, this is an investment tier list, not a DPS comparison, and I value support really high in my tier, which is why my tier list is different from other people's tier lists, right? So the reason Kaguya is always at the top is because since launch, she's pretty much been the best support, a universal support which fits in every team because of her ability to debuff for everything, all the elemental builds. And she's just been at this spot for a very long time, and looks like she's going to be at this spot for a very long time in the future as well, because her support skill is very good, and Fine Aurora is also really good weapon, so you can kind of stack it with Redacted, having the Prismatic Igniter, and that is also a really good combo. So Kaguya stays at the top. Yao is kind of the queen of DPS for a very long time, but Katya gave competition, and now Cherno's also giving competition to her, so all two of them are kind of on a similar level, but Yao and Katya are slightly above Cherno because of the amount of time it takes for Cherno to do her rotation and burst out her damage, and between Yao and Katya, it's really about the boss, the specific boss that you're fighting. Yao still does more pure DPS than Katya, but he's not going to be better than Katya in every situation and every boss. And so I think they're both kind of at the same level, with Yao having higher numbers than Katya, if you have Tess especially, and that's what I think for SSS Plus at least. But if you have any of these in SSS Plus, then you're pretty much set for having teams, right? So these DPSs are really good, and highly recommend pulling for Churn. He's gonna be lasting very long time, just like Katya. And like in terms of playstyle and kits, I think Churn is the most fun out of all of them. So that's also why I would recommend pulling for her, and her weapon is one of the best DPS weapons in the game right now. Then we have in SSS Coronet. Coronet was very versatile, but it just happens to be that Katya and Cherno are a little more versatile than Coronet, but Coronet is still a top tier DPS. She's not bad. She's still a top tier DPS. It's just that she's fallen off a little bit compared to the others. In terms of the bosses that we face usually in New World, and also in the content that we do. In terms of like AoE here in Katya and Cherno, way better than Penny. They're a little bit more versatile than. But she's still great. She's still amazing. She's in SSS as deserved. Shadoka, the second best support. Massive ballistic buffs with Amarna squad. And the Kebashi is just super useful for many bosses, and she fits in a bunch of teams really well. So she's gonna be in SSS for a while. So, and her weapon, Alloy Truth, is absolutely insane. I pulled for tier 2 as soon as the rerun happened, and I regret not getting it in the first time, and if you guys missed it, then please, better get it next time, because that weapon is insane. It's probably the best weapon in the game, so highly recommend getting it T2. Then we have Chenxing Ethereal Cloud, who's kind of fallen off in the tier list. She's still good for Hela and a bunch of other bosses, where she specifically shines, but you don't really use her as much as the ones in SSS Plus. But sometimes she has her niche with certain buffs, so she's still very, very good, and she's not gonna be out of the metas yet, at least. And there's not really any replacement for her right now, because there's no one really who can target multiple parts, but there might be soon. And I'm thinking that she'll probably be power crept in a few patches. But we'll see how it goes. Tess was moved to SSS from SS Plus because like Cherno and Yao, both of them with the ultimates are very, very important for neural speedruns. And so Tess actually enables them to achieve their highest DPS potential by immediately giving them the ultimate, right? And so you have very smooth rotations for both of them because of that. So her value just skyrocketed after Cherno's release, because now she has two of the best DPSs in SSS Plus that she can support. So she's actually really good now. So on Tess rerun, a bunch of us are going to be pulling Tess. And hopefully you will pull it too. So Tess is well deserving, but she's still pretty niche. I don't think she is going to be one of the best supports. Like, you can only use her with ultimate reliant DPSs, but otherwise she's very, very good. It just happens to be that these two are at the top, and that's why she has that much value. Now let's talk about Haru. Haru is an SS Plus because her mobbing skill is kind of insane. She's still one of the best at mobbing. She's like slightly better than Katya, and then after that probably Cherno and Chen Xing. But nobody else really comes close to Haru because her mobbing skill is incredible. And she's also really good against certain bosses in Neuro. We've seen people use Haru quite a bit, and that's why I would say that she deserves to be in SS Plus. But she is not really as good as Coronet or Attila Cloud as a DPS to be in SSS. Because her skill damage doesn't scale as well. Then we have Redacted in SS Plus, the best 4-star support character, who really fits in every single team because she has a time slow, and Navigator makes her basically universal support just like Kaguya. Right, so she's gonna be in SS Plus for a while as well. And in SS we have Wild Hunt, who's been pretty good, to be honest. There's been a bunch of builds, specifically the T2 Alloy Truth builds that you can see right now. This one is actually a pretty decent build for her. Of course, as a DPS, she's doing pretty well, but honestly, a lot of people are using her as a support for Katya, and that's why she's pretty good at SS. You still want her to be at higher manifestations, M1 at least, but as a support, she's great even at M0. Highly recommend using her as a support if you need to, but otherwise she's an okay DPS. She's not super great. She can be great for certain bosses, but I don't know if you want to invest in her compared to all of these, right? I wouldn't recommend. Little Sunshine is also one of the best supports in the 4 stars, along with Observer. I think these two kind of have their own niches in terms of supporting characters. These certain characters can be supported by these two, but they're still used by many FTP players in their teams. We have Marianne Swift, who's still a decent DPS, but she is quite power crept. She can be a support, sort of, for Haru, but she's not that great. But she is a good DPS with Moxer and Kaguya or some other team that just works for ballistic DPS. She's pretty good for that. But yeah, she's gonna stay over here for a while. Hush is in SS only because of Tess, and she's been here because of that. And honestly, she's an ultimate Reliant DPS who's really the worst S rank operator, really, because her DPS is pretty low compared to others. But honestly, if you really invest, I was saying that as in like without any investment, right? At like the plain plate when you get her. But if you really invest in Hush with like significant manifestations, significant logistics grinding and everything, and proper weapons and everything, you can actually get some crazy scores in Neuro if you don't have all the other characters about. So she is good in very niche situations if you invest in her properly, but not worth the investment in my opinion, because it's a lot. But if you like, go ahead and invest in it. Then in S rank, we have the S tier, we have Sirius Goldfish, still a pretty good support. Moxie Meow, who's still a pretty good DPS for FGP. These are basically ones that you would use in early game, right? Even Lionheart you would use in early game. Queen of Pain, she's in S rank, and really now she's got to use as a support for Cherno, so she can use Twilight and reduce chaos resistance. So that's pretty good. Then we have Quiet Butcher as a healer, still the best healer. Then we have Icho in S tier, who I skipped, and honestly, a great decision, because even though she's cute and funny, I'm not a huge fan of her kit. It was very confusing at the start to understand. She needed some buffs and whatnot, and she does work pretty well in some circumstances, but I think those might be bugs. I'm not sure if it was intended or not, but anytime you want to buff like someone's attack, then she's pretty good. And if you need like life healer as well, she's pretty good in like 4-up and paradoxical, but who really cares about it? I don't know. But honestly, she's good for general content, bad for new world. I don't think she's a good investment. She is honestly not the worst best character though. I think she's somewhat better than Hush, because supports always have higher value. And the only reason Hush is over here is because I'm assuming that this is like her best potential as a DPS, which is pretty good. It's really good when you invest in it. But as I said, it's A without optimal Tess, right? If you don't have Tess, then Hush isn't as good. And so Hush would be actually lower than Icho without Tess in A rank or A tier. Then what we have in A tier actually is Chernobyl 2 and Wednesday, who can be support with ally trope. Really, that's the only reason they're in A rank. Otherwise, they weren't that great. But Wednesday has other builds too, which are pretty good for support. And then we have Nita in B tier, Enya in C tier, and Haru the Ace in D tier. I don't even need to talk about that. Nobody uses them. But there was a time when some people used Enya as a support for Yao, but they've all fallen off. Basically, anyone under A, nobody uses them. It's just A and above that everyone uses nowadays, and that's what's useful nowadays. You wouldn't really invest in anyone else. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the tier list and why I made the tier list the way it is. And in terms of like my guide itself, I want to make a few more changes. So as you can see, like for every character, right, I have their team recommendations or whatnot, but I'm thinking of like maybe replacing these team recommendations or doing some other kind of way to help with team building, because it doesn't seem like these team recommendations actually help a lot of people. So I kind of want like feedback from my viewers as well to see like, what do you want to see as like a team building guide, team recommendations guide? Is this format okay? What would you prefer? Right? I was thinking of maybe doing something like a table or a chart, but it really depends because it changes every patch, and it's not easy to really change all the team recommendations for every patch, going through all of this list and seeing which ones work and which ones don't. So instead, I kind of want to make like a centralized thing, but we'll see. Let's see how that goes. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it useful. As you can see, I recommend Chana because she's in SSS first year, and I have a slight suspicion that Exuvia is also going to be really good. At least SSS, because Enya Exuvia seems like she's gonna be a support, and if she is a support, then she would probably be an SSS tier just by default, I think. I would be surprised if she was worse than that, given the direction of the game. I think they're just going to create more and more sumo baits with decently good characters. But I think the power creep actually is pretty good. Like, Chono's such a good example of how to release a perfect character in terms of power creeping, right? Because she fits like a place in the whole structure of the game that doesn't like disrupt anyone else's place, but is also a place where she can fulfill a role really well with her dot damage, the detonation burst, and other stuff. It's a very interesting kit, a fun kit, and I think that's kind of the direction that Snowbreak is going in. I'll talk about it in a video later, kind of talk about the direction of Snowbreak and other thoughts, but for this video, that's it. I hope you found this video useful and have a nice day.